Okay, so now we're in the control room to set our gain, our EQ, listen to the track with the song, make sure Danny's headphones are good. We're going to audition picks, and I'll kind of just talk you through all the moving around and stuff I'm doing. So, first thing, Danny, would you just play on your own, and let's just make sure that you're hearing yourself? Cool. Yeah, keep playing for me. I'm just going to adjust some. Compression and EQ. We're recording the acoustic through the desk. I don't have any EQ going yet. I did say I was going to adjust EQ, but I haven't done anything yet. I want to hear the guitar with the track before I would do any EQing. I'm just making sure, first of all, that my input gain on my mic pre is at an appropriate level, and that I'm getting to my compressor, but I'm not getting too much compression. I'm just getting a little bit of compression action, and then that my level to the computer is good for recording. So just a little bit of information about what we're using in here. We're using the Mojave M200 out there on the acoustic. It's a 1964 Martin D18. This is a quad 8 console. And it's a late 70s design. It is very similar to an API. It has a 3-band EQ, fixed frequencies, fixed gain. And by that I mean that it's not fully parametric. You can't select any frequency you want. It has fixed frequencies. Much in the same you would find on the API 550 plugin. And then for compression, we are using a Retro 176, which is a modern version copy of a Universal Audio 176, which is the original tube compressor that was the predecessor for the 1176 that we all know and love. It's an amazing compressor, and it works really, really well on acoustic guitar. So that's kind of that's what we got going on. I haven't applied any EQ yet. We need to listen to the song with the guitar in the song, and then we're going to audition some picks as well. So I'm going to give Danny a couple bars of pre-roll and then listen to him play against the chorus. Cool, man. Okay, so we heard him play against the track. I mean, I hear it. It sounds pretty good to me. It feels a little mid-rangey. It feels a little bit covered up and a little bit mid-rangey. The first thing I want to do before I hit any EQ is I want to listen to the different picks we have. So, Danny, what pick did we start with?
We're currently using a light pick. Pick. Okay,
so the lightest pick is, well, that's option A. Just give me two other options. The two other options, a B and a C.
So this is a medium pick right here.
Great. I like the sound of that much better. Can you go back to the A option just so we can hear the comparison? Great, thanks. Cool. So, and then let's go to the C option.
This is a heavy pick.
All right, just in isolation, the B option felt the best to me. So let's hear that in the track in just a moment. I just want to explain what I was hearing. So the softer pick had the string sound and the articulation of the strum was just wasn't as clear, and I think that's what was giving us a little bit of that mid-rangey tone. And then the medium pick felt the most balanced to me, just in terms of pick and string articulation and the tone of the body. And then also, then we went to the C option, which was a heavier pick, and I just felt like there was just too much percussiveness and strumming sound, which, you know, any of those sounds may be really usable depending on what you're applying it for and how you want to use it. This needs to sound a little bit more balanced because we're only using one acoustic in the track just to kind of fill things out. So let's now listen to Danny play with the B option pick to the chorus, and I might add a little bit of EQ. We're going to record this just so we can play it back now that I feel like a little bit closer to our decision. So I just kind of wanted to change the volume and get it more in the track, like how it's meant to be. I have it turned up loud so that I can hear it, so that you can hear it. But I turned it down so I can get a better feel for what it is I'm hearing. I feel like I could use just a little bit. When I turn it down, I feel like I lose the top end articulation. So I'm gonna brighten it a little bit with EQ and then double check my compressor. I should explain to you also that the compressor is after the EQ. So I've got the microphone coming into the preamp of the console, which the signal flow is the EQ is next, and then as the signal is going from the desk to the computer, that's where the compressor is inserted in the path. It's not on the insert of the console. Because that would be between the EQ and the fader, and any adjustment that I made on the fader would not influence the compressor. And this with changing the output of the desk, because that's what's going to the compressor. I can manipulate the output here, which will change. Which I won't have to go over to the compressor to adjust it. I can turn this up and feed more level to the compressor and subsequently get more compression, or turn it down and get less compression. But I might have to go over there to manage my final output stage, which feeds the computer as the record volume. Just so you understand, it's important to kind of always be understanding and thinking about your signal flow to know where to go to adjust a certain aspect of the gain structure, because we have an input gain with a mic pre. We have an input gain on the compressor, we have an output gain on the compressor, and we have an output gain on the console. So there's four amplifiers in sequence in this signal path, and so it's important to understand the order of things. So the actual order of things would be mic pre, console fader output, compressor input, compressor output. That's what's in series that gets the signal to the recorder. So Danny, if you would play again on your own, I'm going to adjust a little bit of EQ. Okay, so all I was manipulating was the top the top band, the high frequencies. I don't really feel like I need to manage the mid-range or change the low end. I just kind of want a little bit more of that sparkle to have the instrument cut through the track at a low volume. I have selected 7,500 cycles as the frequency that I want to boost. I was fishing around between 4.5 to 10,000 cycles, changing my options there, and I was boosting it. I'm just boosting it a couple dB, and then I was switching in and out of peak and shelf. I have landed on the bell curve, the peak. I don't want to use the shelf. The shelf is drawing up too much of the mid-range and extended below my selected frequency of 7,500 cycles. It just feels a little bit more appropriate. The shelf was making it sound a little bit harsh. So let's have Danny play again to the track, and we'll just make sure that our record level is good and the EQ choice I've made feels nice. Okay, sounding good, man. Hang on, I just want to explain what I was doing with the compressor. So on the compressor, I turned the gain up a little bit on it to get a little bit more compression happening. I'm using a 2-to-1 ratio. I'm using a very low ratio. I'm not trying to get a lot of compression because the sound, the placement of the microphone, and the pick choice have helped me balance the dynamic and frequency response of what it is I'm capturing. And so I don't need anything to work really super hard for me. My engineering approach is work on the source as much as possible, get the source as close to the sound you want, and then use these tools in here to bring a final shape to it. Now, sometimes do I use this equipment in a more aggressive fashion? Absolutely, but I always strive to have the source sound the best that it can. So we got a low ratio, 2-to-1, and I was also adjusting the release time. I slowed it down a little bit because the compressor was letting go of compression a little bit too fast and making it, the guitar wasn't sitting as well. So I'm going to ask Danny to play one more time just on his own, and I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna change the ratio from 2-to-1 to 4-to-1, and I'm gonna speed the release time back up just so you can hear what I was hearing when the track was going. So if you would play again for us, sir. So when I was 2 fingers, it was 2-to-1, 4 fingers, 4-to-1, and you could hear on the 4-to-1, it was just like it was just hitting it a lot harder, and you could hear the compression a lot more. On 2-to-1, it was a bit more transparent. It felt a little more even and controlled. One more time for me, sir, so I can change the release time. Perfect. So the first thing I did is I sped the release time way up, and you can really hear the compression more because it's just hitting the transient and the strum, and then letting go of the compression, and then you hear the tone of the body kind of like jump up and become really pronounced. I'm trying to find that release time that lets the compressor let go enough so that when the next transient comes, that it's not still in too much compression, and it balances the sound out. And I've just sort of found the the proper release time to maintain the tone, and make the whole instrument sound balanced. So I think we're ready to record Danny playing to the track. We've had something that happens often in a recording situation. You started playing a little harder than you were in auditioning. That happens. I mean, that's totally natural. Something to be aware of. It wasn't quite the desired sound. I was getting too much compression, and the tone kind of shifted, and the sound we were capturing wasn't even. It's got a little red light fever out there. It's totally natural and happens all the time. So let's do it one more time. Can you just audition the level for me again, like how you were playing? Are you still playing a little bit harder than you were?
I turned myself up a little bit so that.
Okay. He's turned himself up a little bit in the headphones. Oh, you could probably hear that. So and that also so that he can hear himself better, and then he's not having to play harder to try and get his sound to kind of come up. Give me one more audition, sir. That sounds great. I like it. Okay, so let's do this. Sounded good in here. Any confessions?
I might have hit that last F chord a little hard, so maybe punch the second half.
Sure, we'll grab the second half, and then I'll give it a close listen.
Cool.
So yeah, it's good to get feedback. I mean, ultimately, I have to make the decision because I'm in here listening on the speakers, and I'm producing the takes and the production and guiding the performances. But I always want to ask the musicians how they're feeling, how they feel like they did, because sometimes they'll make a mistake that I won't immediately catch, but they're aware of it. So I will start you. I'll start you two bars before the middle. Let's try that again. I'm going to give you a couple more bars of pre-roll.
Cool.
Cool, man. Let me just have a little listen here. Sounded good to me. Let's do chorus 2.
Cool.
Would you do me a favor and check your tuning? Always good, especially with acoustic instruments, guitars, electric guitars as well. Check the tuning often. And once we get this chorus recorded, I'm going to just double check that our tuning is as sweet as it can be for the first chorus. It wasn't far out, was it?
No.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So let's get to chorus 2. One small point I want to make that you hopefully can observe is that as I give the musician pre-roll before we're actually going to be punching in, they hear the sound of playback, and I always ask anyone that's recording, especially when we're doing punches, to be playing and singing along at all times, so that the punch in points and the punch out points feel natural and balanced. But what I typically like to do is start the playback with them hearing the existing track. In this case, we had four bars of pre-roll. After a couple bars, and Danny is able to sort of hear it and get in time with the track, I switch it to input so that he can actually hear himself before the intended point of punching in, so that he can actually feel himself playing in the track, and that he's not playing too loud or too quiet based on that when it starts he can't really hear himself, and that makes for just a better edit point and a more natural feeling punch in and recording insertion. So I'm just going to listen now. Hang tight for me another minute, Danny. I like the way the second chorus feels like, in the pocket a little bit more, and I think the tuning is just slightly better. So can we now redo the first chorus? So we're going to replace chorus 1. We've tuned the guitar up. I think his feel has improved over playing to the track. I'm going to make a new playlist, so that we're not going over something. We're keeping playlists of our work. Great, man. Okay, so we've got our acoustic guitar recorded for this song. I want to just show you one more technique to consider using 2 microphones, and we're not going to record it to the song. But we'll build off this sound that we already have by adding a second microphone in. Now, the caveat here is I'm able to do it on a console where I'm able to blend the 2 microphones together. You might have to, if you're working only in a DAW, you can either print 2 tracks, but if you have a way to blend the tracks and commit the tracks to one track, I would recommend that just for track count, commit to a sound, and just sort of move along. Don't leave it with two tracks to continually try to interpret what the sound can be and rebalance it. Chances are, most of the time, when you record multiple tracks for something, the balance is the balance, and that's pretty much the way it stays. So let's go back out and join Danny and add a microphone, and then I'll show you in here what we're doing with it. You might be wondering why it is kind of at the volume it's at in terms of recorded level. I could certainly record it a little bit hotter, but there's no need to push the converter to a place where it might clip or get like an excessive amount of level. I'm getting peaks around -8, -9, and for a lot of stuff that's a really good enough level. You're using most of the bit depth, which is the most important part of digital recording, because that's where the real the sample rate is always a sample rate, but the bit depth is another part of the resolution, and that's why people are concerned about how loud they're recording. The old idea that when the bit depth was a lot lower with older digital systems, the idea was that you needed to record louder to take advantage of all of the resolution. There's trade-offs in that. The louder you record something, the more you risk clipping the converter on the way in to get that level. And also what ends up happening in the computer is I'm using most of the bit depth even at -8 or 9. But then what ends up happening in your session is that you end up having, with a really hot recording, you end up turning the volume of the instrument in the DAW way down. And when you do that, when you change a volume from 0, you immediately tell the program that it's got to reinterpret the digital audio. And so if you have to turn something down to like -20 for it to be balanced in the proper place, you're throwing away part of the sound anyways. So I try to record in more moderate gains. I want to see it at the top of the green, around the yellow. Some things like kicks and snares, things that are really percussive and hard hitting, that have a lot of transients. Yeah, I mean, sometimes they're going to clip, but that's okay because because it's so momentary that it's not necessarily a bad sound, and you kind of need to do that to get the full tone of the instrument. But like an acoustic guitar, where there's not a lot of dynamic, especially because I'm compressing it, I don't need to record it super loud, and I also I don't want to have to turn my fader way down, because there's a quality loss in doing that. And then also, I like to use automation, and the further a fader is down, the lower the resolution is towards the bottom of the fader throw, and so it's much harder to make subtle volume changes when the fader is way down. Drums like kick and snare, like I said, typically are going to be up near 0. They're going to be much louder. A bass guitar, and it's also frequency dependent. A bass guitar, a good recording level for a bass guitar is like anywhere from -6 to -12, honestly. It depends on the sound, how much transient response there is. What shows up on VU meters more substantially is low frequency stuff. So you'll notice that that if you look at the level of a bass at like -9 or -12, a VU meter for that signal printed in digitally is going to be approaching 0. So I'm someone that likes to record. I want to record a good sound. I want to get good gain structure, and I want to record something in the computer that has it's good enough resolution, good enough signal to noise ratio, but I don't necessarily want everything to be super hot, because then I've got to turn it all down in the computer and the gain structure becomes very difficult to manage. And sometimes it's like a good test, a good target is my guitar. Maybe it seems like it's in a pretty good range of balance in the around 0 unity setting of the fader. Could certainly record. I wouldn't really want to record this guitar much quieter. Certainly could record it a little louder. We're averaging, like I said, around -9. We could get up to -3, and that would be fine. I really wouldn't want to take it past that. I certainly wouldn't want to risk clipping the sound at all. So the additional thing I wanted to show you is with this microphone, and if I wanted to add a little bit of more tone of the body, introduce a second microphone, and I'm gonna put it over here in this position. Now you can use this technique for stereo if you wanted. Sometimes it's good to spread them out like this. Sometimes you might put them together. I'm just gonna show you what it's like to add a little bit of the tone of the body in here. That's a Coles 4038 ribbon mic, so it's actually hearing a little bit. It hears in front and behind, so we will get a little bit more of an ambient open sound over on this side of the guitar, hopefully it's gonna. What my plan is to show you that, you know, if I'm not getting as full of a sound from a mic in this position, obviously to get the most articulation, as it was demonstrated by moving the mic around, this position is going to be the most articulate for and brightest and clearest for the guitar, depending on the instrument. Now, not all instruments are created equally, and it also depends on how it fits into your track. But if I was feeling like I wasn't getting enough warmth and body just from this mic, but this is where the necessary clarity was coming from. That's why I'm saying, like, hey, let's add this second mic over here where this warmer perspective is, and we'll blend it in, and we'll play with the balance of the two, and you can kind of see how you can shape the sound here again without having to necessarily go to an EQ as your first move. So let's jump in the control room and check that out. Okay, so I put that Coles ribbon mic on the body position. I'm going to turn off the Mojave for the time being, and just so we can just hear that microphone. Now, these microphones are being blended together on the console, and going out the same output out of the console into the compressor, and then on their way to the computer. So I'm gonna turn off the Mojave. I'm gonna turn on the Coles, and I'm gonna ask Danny if he would play, please. Okay, so I've set it up so that my gain structure is similar with just this one microphone. You can hear the obvious difference. It's a bit warmer. It's a little bit murkier. Doesn't have that clear presence. But now we're going to combine the microphones, and I've turned the Coles down and off. And Danny, if you keep playing for me, please, sir. Thanks. And I'm going to turn the Mojave back on. So this is the sound we had before. And I'm going to add the Coles in. Okay, so I brought it in. You kind of hear the bottom end get a little bit bigger, and the whole sound got a little fuller. And then I took it down and then brought it back in. Now I'm gonna play with the balance. Right now the balance is probably 60-40 with the Mojave microphone on the 12th fret being the dominant sound, I'll switch that relationship so it's 60-40 with the Coles and just sort of play with that balance a little bit so you can hear the difference. Danny, if you would. Okay, so I went back and forth. I did it twice. So the brighter, more articulate sound is the 60-40 with the Mojave being the dominant sound, and then the darker sound is the Coles being the more dominant sound. And you can hear how they're both really nice, usable sounds. And this way, I want to make sure that I have good mic placement, certainly, but I might not be able to capture all of the sound or the way that I want with just one microphone. So just want to show you that you can put couple microphones on the nicer sounding areas of an instrument, acoustic, and then sort of blend them together. And then once they're combined, they're going through the compressor together. I'm going to do one further thing, and I'm going to make the sounds equal. I mean, we kind of got there as I was transitioning, but I just kind of want to make the sounds equal so you can hear what that sounds like. Danny, if you would grace us again. Thank you, sir. Okay, so there you go. One further thing I would say is that before or after my compressor, I could add in an EQ, and I could, in the case where I have two microphones going, I can certainly EQ them individually, and the Mojave still has that 7.5K boost on it that we put in there originally. I didn't change that sound. And if I felt like I wanted to EQ the Coles at all, I could do that individually the way I have it set up. And then I could, once I've established what combination, what balance and overall sound I want by blending the two, I could add an EQ before or after the compressor. You'll get a different sound by putting an EQ before or after a compressor, so it's something to experiment with. Given that this is not too dynamic of a performance and the sound is not changing a lot, I wouldn't necessarily have to EQ before the compressor to shape the sound that's going into compression to kind of help me shape the way the compressor was seeing the signal to control it. I would probably put a equalizer after the compressor just to enhance that sound a little bit and further shape it. I don't think that that's necessary to show you. I think you can probably conceptualize how that would be. Don't necessarily do that. I have to do that. I could and will once I've recorded something and I get to the mixing phase. Of course, I'm going to put another EQ on it and then fine tune it to fit in the mix in the big picture when everything is put together. But just wanted to show you like another technique to kind of get acoustic guitar certainly, but a lot of other instruments. You know, just listen to the instrument, find the sweet spots, put some microphones in front of them, and this is a technique for how you can balance and get a good tone.